Hello and welcome back to the Commerce Club podcast. Today I am joined by the lovely Eniye, who is the founder of Beame. We actually first connected on Instagram a few years ago when she was running her first business called Blob Box. And I wanted to invite her on stage because I know since then, since we first connected, and she's one of the few people that I've met online that I've met in real life, I know that she's been on this massive entrepreneurial journey and she's gone through so many different things and processes to get her new business Beame started. So I wanted to talk through that process of starting a new business because I know it's super interesting to people who are also going through it. So welcome, Eniye. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your entrepreneurship journey?
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited.
Yay.
So I'm the founder of Beame. Beame is an SPF brand. We create easy to reapply and fun to use as well as fun to unbox sunscreen. And we do that by including ingredients and scents that keep you coming back. Our goal is to get people to reapply their sunscreen because we know that people do wear sunscreen, but they don't actually always like reapply their sunscreen. So that's sort of our focus and our goal.
That's so true. Like on your face, you're like, I don't, or if you put like makeup on after you've like put the sunscreen on and then you don't want to reapply it, like I totally can see the need and demand for the product like yours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, just going back a little bit before you started Beam, as I said at the beginning, you started Blob Box. Talk us a
Yes.
little bit about that business and then how you've found yourself in your second business.
Honestly, I feel like I'm a problem solver. I think all my businesses have come from a need in my personal life to sort of like me fixing it. So with Bloodbox, it had to do with my sister and not like her starting her first period and not knowing much about her menstrual cycle and me just sort of creating a box, a subscription box that that could get delivered to her house or anyone who doesn't know about their menstrual cycle and making it like an enjoyable experience for them. And then with Beam, that started through me going through stress actually during that time of doing too much in my life and just everything was just a lot. So I was dealing with so much stress during that time. And that's kind of how I transitioned from creating Blobbox to moving on to Beam, sort of creating a need and a problem and solving a problem through each and everything I've created, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
Absolutely. I think the best businesses, to be honest, are out of problems, right? Because ultimately, if you've got that problem, so many other people are probably sharing that same exact issue. And ultimately, if no one else has solved it, if you can't find a solution and you've done all of the research, then so have those other people. So you know, most more than likely, it's a good actual way to test in the fact that there is probably market demand and need for that product. Did
Exactly.
you like obviously you had both of these problems in both businesses. Did
Yeah.
you then go out and do any extra research to kind of like validate that this problem was also shared by
I
other
did.
people?
I did. I had to do like surveys, like you would find me in like Facebook groups, like literally asking people, can you please complete the survey? I would be messaging like admins of groups, like, please can I just put this out? So I was doing loads of like market research. I was also using a lot of data from like places like Mintel, WGSN, like literally just anywhere I could find actual factual data that people have done sort of back what I'm saying actually exists. So yeah, I was doing loads of market research, but beyond that, I once I got further with the product, then I was actually testing it out on doing more research with people to physically touch the product and get more insight. So yeah, I think I've always been doing research to nail down the product and the problem I'm actually addressing to make sure I'm nailing it right because if you're not creating a product that's actually going to solve something, it's just not going to work, is it? I think, especially when you're bringing it to market, you can't just spend so much money and time to create something that isn't going to actually serve a purpose. So that's kind of why I value that time of creating and just yeah doing a lot of research and getting to know my customer. I think that's the main point of all of this, really seeing what just learning so much about them. Yeah, so that's been my core focus, I would say.
I think that's really good though, because so many people don't do that step. You would be surprised by how many people don't do that step. Obviously, I work with founders all the time, and I'm like, right, okay, who's your customer? Not a clue. Okay, right, what market research have we got to to prove that this product has a demand or a need in the market? Haven't done any. Okay, well, let's go back to basics and let's start there, because without that, how on earth do you know who you're marketing to? How on earth do you know if someone is actually going to buy it? And exactly, key point that you just said, you're wasting time and money on
Mm,
doing something that you have absolutely no proof or evidence that could potentially work. So I think you went about that in like the perfect way. Ultimately, you have to know exactly who your customer is. Like at the end of the day, they are the core of your business. Like without
mhm,
them, you don't really have the business,
mm,
because no one's going to be buying your product. So I think
agreed.
that that's like such an important step to go through, and should be the first step that any kind of new business does, is really hone in on one, what their mission is, what their values are as a business, and then who the bloody hell they're targeting and where it fits into the market. Because without
Mm,
those things, everything else you do
agreed.
is honestly a little bit pointless. So I
Agreed.
think that's great that you did that.
Fully agreed. Yeah, I think that's honestly always what I've done with every like Blob Box. I never stopped researching. You never. I would say as an entrepreneur, you never stop doing research into your customer and your business model and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And it changes, doesn't it? As the more that you go along with your business as well, it is going to naturally change, because you evolve as a business, and that's okay. You don't have to stick
Yeah.
to this same
No.
demographic or exactly the same everything
No.
that you did where you fit into the market at the beginning. It can evolve as your brand evolves, but you have to keep on top of it. You have to keep knowing it as you
Mm,
go along, so that you can adapt everything else that you're doing.
agreed.
So yeah, it's super important step. And just going back quickly to Blob Box, like what made you make the decision to kind of shut that business and
Mm.
then move on to the next one?
That's a great question because actually no one's ever actually asked me that. I would say the moment I knew was when I was actually looking at the subscription model overall. I love insights. I'm such a insights person. I love it. Anyways, I was doing loads of research and I could feel in the air, feel it also, but also did loads of research that the subscription model wasn't working. And this was a time that consumers were going, it was inflation that was happening, but it was still happening. And we're going through a cost of living crisis. And you get to understand what the economy is looking like. And I just knew that this model wasn't going to work long time. And I could see like the likes of like Birchbox like closing down. And they had actually closed on a few months after I had closed down. So I was like, oh my God, this this isn't working. Even for like the likes of Birchbox, like it's not working for them. So that's when I knew something was wrong. And yeah, I just kind of evaluated everything. I looked at my customers, my repeat customers, what was happening. I was asking them, why are you unsubscribing? And I was getting a lot of insights, but like it's too expensive. This is like not really what I would be spending if I had to spend on, anything for the month. Like my priorities are like, groceries or like other like things. Like this is like such a like luxury expense. And then I had to reevaluate like really this isn't like sustainable for me. I did think about going down the route of sort of like offering like a first time just like box for like people who have their periods, which is something I already did. But then I didn't really want that to be my core business because I really wanted to like go beyond the first time period and really just go beyond that. So I just felt like as a business model, the subscription box model wasn't working for me. And you needed a lot of volume, if that makes sense. For like the products you're buying in, like with any products that we would put in the box, we would need a substantial to actually make more money out of it. The subscription box model works with a lot of bigger brands because a lot of brands offer them free products, whereas we were actually buying the products from brands. It was costing us a lot of money, and I wasn't really making any profit. And I looked at my numbers, my margin was so low. And I come from a buyer, you know what, and I'm sure you do, you understand, like the margin was like 30 something percent. That's not good enough. Like long term, like that was pretty scary. Looking at that, I was like, there's no way I can really make much. out of this long term. This is like not a, it's not a good enough model to, you know, like really like sit on, basically, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So that's when I sort of knew it was time to kind of like let the business go and not like make it, I didn't want to run it down even further. So I was like, I know this is the best sort of time to leave it now and leave it as it is. And you know what? I know I did the best as I could, and I think sometimes it's best to know when to leave something before things get worse. And I think I left at the best time, if I'm honest, because like I said, after that, a few months after, Bridge Box did close down. Um, and yeah, I just think the subscription model is all about volume, and yeah, and you need a lot of funding to sort of fund that volume. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you've made some really good points, three really good points in that. And first of all, yes, subscription I think is a pre-pandemic, in the pandemic, perfect business
yeah,
model, like absolutely perfect. Like people wanted something being delivered to them consistently, regularly, on a regular basis, and it worked so well. And I
yeah,
feel like since maybe like 2022, 2023, it started to kind of like really decline because
mm,
people aren't necessarily, as you said, like they don't have the disposable income anymore. So the first cut to be made is like, what have I got on my direct debit list that I can cancel out? And it is going to naturally be like a
yeah,
subscription based business. Even Netflix, for example, they've
mm,
introduced all of these like lower cost solutions
exactly.
for their streaming, right? Like it's, they've got like, what is it? I think it's like £4.99 a month that you can pay, but it's got ads or something, because they
Mm,
obviously clearly could see that people were struggling cancelling
yeah,
the Netflix subscriptions as and when
yeah,
they needed to. Like I've even done
yeah,
it with my Amazon one, for example. I don't have that anymore. So I feel like, exactly, you're completely right. Subscription model definitely had a peak, which is exactly the perfect timing that you were in it. And I think that was an amazing way for you to be introduced to business and then grow and understand like the operations, because then you've obviously been able to take those learnings into your next one. And then the second thing is
yeah,
profit. We're both from buying backgrounds, so we both completely understand that. But again, a lot of the business founders that I work with don't really understand that profit is kind of the first thing that they should be thinking about. If you see in the background, actually, I've literally got like profit first, like sat behind me.
love
And I don't always follow that, I will be honest, because in my
that.
own life, I am not the best at it. But in a business
Business
capacity,
capacity, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
in the business capacity,
You know how
you
important
have
it
to
is.
know your
Yeah,
numbers, you have to understand the data. So I love that you said you like looking at the analytics and the insights to understand that and make smart decisions. And I think it's such a brave thing to be able to look at something and be like, I've built this business. You were obviously really passionate about it at the beginning because
yeah,
you had a problem that you wanted to solve, and I'm sure it was a really amazing achievement
yeah,
for you to like go through that process, build something out of your own problem that really
yeah,
had a demand and a need in the market.
yeah,
But to be able to sit there and be like, this subscription, like analyze the market and say, actually, the subscription model isn't going to work and I'm not making the money that I need from this. It's a really big deal to say, I'm going to step away from this now. Like I'm going to go out whilst it's still on a high, kind of thing. That's a really brave thing to do. So I really commend you for being able to do that. How did that feel from like a personal level? Like, was it emotional, or was it like just a logical decision that felt like the
wow.
right thing to do?
It was a logical decision, but you know, that actually affected. So we actually won a 10 grand grant that month, and I had to actually be like, I'm stepping away from this. Yeah, yeah. So, and we didn't obviously get the funding because I was like, I'm stepping away from the business. So that was funny, and that made me really sad because obviously I worked towards like grants like that, and then had to step away from that opportunity. Mentally, it was a lot. I would say only a few months ago was I able to like get rid of the stock because I couldn't look at the stock. Like I gave it to charity because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna like try sell this. Like I gave it to like a period charity, but like I felt sick that I had like all that just in like it was like a core memory for me, and building such a cool brand and like a really impactful brand really it did take a lot like mentally to sort of like realize like wow, I can't believe like I'm stepping away from this. So mentally it was a lot.
I can
It was a
imagine.
lot.
I can imagine. I think. like I feel like I'm kind of at that stage of my, obviously we have different businesses, but I feel like I'm at the stage of my first business where I'm like, okay, I think I've taken that business to where it needed to go, and now it's time for
Mm.
me to pivot and change into something else. That's not going to be
Yeah.
me stepping away from the business completely, but it
No.
definitely is going to be me changing quite a lot
Yeah.
about that business. And
Yeah.
it's taken me a good 6 to 8 months to come to terms with the fact that that needs to happen,
Yeah.
because it's almost like you've built this thing and you
Mm.
obviously are really passionate still about that thing, but the
Yeah.
market doesn't need it anymore, and
No.
also it's not giving you the results that you
No.
personally need. So you have to make some really tough decisions, and I really commend anybody that does that, and then also finds the because this isn't an easy journey, this journey of starting a business, right? Like then finds the strength to then be like, right, I'm going to start again, let's go again, let's do round two.
Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I was like, my partner was like, "Are you okay? Like, you've not even like finished your other business." I was like, "I'm on to the next one." Because I usually like have to be doing something. I think it was like the day after like I closed. I said I was like mentally done with the business. I was like sitting in my bed and I was like, "What am I gonna do with my evening?" This is my life now, like doing nothing. And I felt really like not complete. I felt like this can't be it for me. Like, and I was
Yeah.
like, this can't be like where it ends. So I knew that I needed, I personally, what gets me going is having something I've built on my own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that, and I think that's such a good realization to have. It's like, right, this isn't my end of my story. Let's go round two. So, was it at that same point that you then started Beam? Like, what's talk me through that process of like, what was the initial things that led you on
Yeah.
that journey with starting Beam?
Yeah. So once I had closed Blob Box down, I actually went to South Africa to visit my family. Um, I was obviously severely stressed in that time. And also, you could, like, when I'm stressed, you can see it in my face. Like, my face can't hide it. And I'm a person that barely wears makeup. So when you see me, it's just like, oh my God, like this is like not the same person. So you can see it visually in my face. So I had gone to South Africa to visit family. I came from a household where I didn't wear sunscreen at all. My mom till this day does not wear sunscreen, like literally at all. So I wasn't wearing sunscreen on my holiday. I was obviously severely stressed. I didn't also realize that when your skin is stressed, the sun actually causes more damage to your
Mm,
skin. I did not know that. So
yeah,
I mean, didn't also wear sunscreen. I also didn't reapply sunscreen. So things were not looking great on my skin. So I was obviously going to South Africa to get, I would say, myself back to the way I was. Um, mentally, and I wasn't there. So I was sort of using the sun to boost my mood, but it was just causing even more damage, truly, on my skin physically. I was physically feeling fine, getting there, but my face wasn't. So it was just causing so much damage. And I was like, I'm like, there has to be a way, like, I can fix what is going on my face. And I didn't realize, obviously, like, this is something called psychodermatology. It's basically the connection between your mental health and your skin. I didn't truly know what that was until I created Beam, like that the actual word, the field of study, that's
yeah,
what it's called. But yeah, that's sort of how I was looking for like something to protect my skin, but also reduce the stress on my skin that I was going through in that moment. That's I did find were like just about some protection, but I was like, okay, but I'm going through something physically on my skin on a day-to-day basis, and I need to get my mood back, and I need to get my skin looking back the way it was. So why isn't there anything like that? And there's loads of products in the beauty market, but there's not that much products that actually sort out your stress levels or like anything like related to all the stress you're going through on your face. And that's sort of why I created Beam, so you kind of focus on the emotional element of what you're going through to help you with your skin. And especially because the sun doesn't play a major factor in all of the emotional side of things. So that's sort of like why I created Beam. I was going through a really difficult time, sort of grieving my business, and just, yeah, really stressed from life and everything that was happening. And that's sort of like when the problem I really wanted to solve was happening. But yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. And there is such a big link. Like the more research that I do with mental health and obviously like the new business that I've launched with Tina, like the more I understand that, the more I understand that like everything is so connected.
Mm.
And I think it's great that you came to that conclusion and you've trying to solve that problem. But I guess for you, like where you hadn't been wearing sunscreen, did you know much about that field, or was this like a completely new thing for you that you had to learn
It was
everything
so
about?
new. It was so new. So like obviously my experiences in buying, but I had never done like sunscreen or like sun care. I had mostly done like fragrance. So like I really was into like scents, but like I had done nothing in like sun care at all. Like I knew nothing about the market at all. I think it's
Yeah,
like it's very different when obviously when you're buying, there's two different sorts of buying, like branded buying and like own brand. And I never did like own brand, like product development. I did more like branded, like the
yeah.
brands and like that. That's the side. Like so I never even saw anything about the product life cycle of creating a new product from scratch. So everything was sort of new to me, and yeah, like I knew nothing about the sun care market at all, truly.
So it was a journey of you learning about it as you go along, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's super interesting because it is some it's like you could identify that there was a need, but actually it was in an industry that you haven't got any like experience with. And I think that that's also really common is someone has this an amazing idea for something, but quite a lot of the time it actually puts them off starting because they're like, oh my god, I've got to start from scratch and I really don't know anything about this market. But for you it was almost like, well, I know that I need to solve a problem, so I have to learn about it, which I think is really cool. And like when you had that idea then, and when you started doing the research and you started to understand a little bit more about that industry, I know that you did a couple of like business accelerators and you went through that process. Like talk me through that process from kind of like ideation going through the accelerator, and like what did you get out of that?
Yeah, so I at the time, well, I still have a friend. So my friend, she was starting her own body care brand, and I was like, and I was telling her for ages, like I really want to start my own skincare brand, like I really want to. And I basically just asked him, like, what did you do? Like, just tell me what you did, because I still don't really know what to do. She's like, oh, you need to get a chemist or you need to get a manufacturer, guiding me through what she was doing because she was only starting her journey of creating her product. So I was like, okay. So she gave me a contact of a chemist to reached out to her. But at the same time, I was doing loads of, research because when you're talking to a chemist, you actually need to know what your product needs to look like. Like the chemist be like, fill out this form, tell me what your benchmark is, tell me how many mils, tell me what your UV protection needs to be. Like they'll ask you so many detailed questions and you need to sort of be ready because you can't just think you want to create a product, you need to have that. So that's why a lot of market research needed to be done before I actually spoke to my chemist and outlined what I did, because you're only allowed with my chemist certain amount of reiterations of changes of what you want it, because then it starts getting more expensive. So that's sort of what I did. I did go through, I think, one accelerator in the new year after that, because I started like researching about the idea in September. Then I created my company in October. In the new year, I did do an accelerator, but that was based around funding, like getting funding for my business because I had none. I like for Blob Box, I relied on grants, but this is very different because the business model is different. It's with Blob Box, I could sort of phrase my grant funding around like the impact, and you can with my product as well, because our aim is addressing something really, really important, like skin cancer. Like the 18 to 34-year-old age group in the UK, we have like the highest skin cancer rates. So I guess like all of the things I've created sort of impactful, and they have a lot of data to back what I've done. But yeah, it was super hard to sort of get funding to fund even the development of the formula for my chemist, because I have to pay her for that. So I did this accelerator, and I actually got a grant from doing the accelerator, which was great, and that funded my chemist. or parts of it funded my chemist. And the accelerator was good for um yeah, like raising funding, but it's so the funding landscape is so hard as a product business, like in the consumer space. So it probably wasn't the right time for me to start fundraising, considering I hadn't much but sort of an idea and not actually done anything in theory to prove that anyone wanted the product, if that makes any sense. So it was great, like inside, because I knew nothing about much about fundraising, but I loved the program, and I connected with so many people, networked with so many people that I still speak to this day. And it's been part of my, I would say, my story that I did that accelerator. So that's the only accelerator I've done for Beame. It's called Founderland, and yeah, it was amazing. I really enjoyed it, and then yeah, I think that's the only accelerator I've done. Yeah,
Oh, okay, cool. That's really good though. Like I think going through like that process and learning about like the funding, like that's even if you don't do that process again for Beam, for example, like you've got that skill now. Like you've learned
yeah,
something, you've taken away from that. And I think accelerators. I don't know a lot about accelerators, but I do know that they are really great for
I
getting
agree.
funding at the end of it and the connections that you make. I'm sure you made quite a lot of connections, not only people doing similar things to you, like going through that startup process, but also people that can potentially introduce you to people that may help you with the development as your business grows as well.
Agreed.
So that's really cool. And then once you had that funding for your accelerator, then like what was your kind of like next steps?
So my next step was basically to then start my formulation of my product. As soon as I got that, and I did fund that. Some of the funding came from my job as well. As soon as I got like the first iteration of the formula, I basically started reaching out to the people who were doing my surveys, and I'm like, listen, do you wanna test the product? Because I've got it here. And just getting feedback to make the formula as good as we can to bring it to market. So that was like my main goal in all of that whole thing. And it was great because, I can actually get some user feedback to add onto like my pitch deck, because of what you send investors. And be like, this is how many people have tested it. They like to see like results, they like to see numbers. That's one thing about investors. They like to see exactly, how many people have tested it, how many people are going to buy it, like sort of like that. So I was building my own data as a brand. I think that's super important to do when you're in the idea stage of doing all of this, creating your own data house you can use. But yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think data is king, right? Like it literally can tell you everything that you need to know. So it's such an underrated tool that I see in business, and it's something that I try and teach people to use more in their businesses. Because going back to what you said earlier about the different types of buying, I was in the same style of buying as you. I did like branded and more strategic buying rather than
Mm,
product development, and that is all we did. Like they said, buying in the fashion industry sounds like it should be really creative. No, actually it's very highly analytical, and you have to be super commercially minded to understand
yeah.
the numbers and the facts and the figures, because ultimately that is how you make more money. So I think it's so good that you now have all of that data behind you. You've got all of those facts, and you can then use that again to raise more funding, or you can use that to invest more into different areas of the business that you come out of the fact that you understand this data and the research. So I think that's a really good thing to do. And then, at what point did you start like marketing the brand? Like, I know I remember hearing you talk about it even when you're going through your accelerator, like on LinkedIn and stuff. But like, at what point did you be like, right, I need to get this out to the world now?
As soon as I had the idea, like on day one, I literally created, like I was searching, like, does anyone have like my domain? Does anyone have like my Instagram or social media handles? So like it's like from day one I was purchasing all these things, creating accounts, and I was talking about it, and I was following anyone and everyone who wanted to listen to me talk about my brand, basically. So I would say, yeah, even when I was in South Africa, I think that's when I created all the accounts and started talking about it. And I've probably not stopped talking about it, the brand. And it's probably been the best thing I've ever done, because some people like, like you could have seen the like, journey of how it really started versus how it is for now. And it's been super different. Like, yeah, but I've been talking about it since day one.
Yeah, you have to. And like even if you haven't got any of like the content or the material, like I'm sure you didn't do a photo shoot on day one, do you know? Like you didn't do that
No.
until you had the product. But like you still have to be talking about the concept, talk about the idea, because then later on down the line, like I remember you first starting talking about it and then I've seen the involvement of it until to like what
Yeah.
it is today, which is really
No.
cool. And it's not like I've seen it every day because I've not been conscious, but every time I see you pop up, I'm like, oh, I know what she's doing, I know what she's working on. Then I'll
Yeah.
maybe spark something to me like, oh, I'm going to go and check out her Instagram. And then I'm going to be like, oh, her product's really cool. I'm going to go and click through onto her website. Like it takes you on that journey before you even have the product. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And it's something I've definitely tried to do with Tina as well. Probably not as much as I probably could have or should have,
Mm.
but it's definitely something that so many founders, again, don't do. They think they have to wait until they have their product to start speaking
No.
about something, when actually start talking about it when you've got the idea, show the progress, show the process,
No.
go through the whole thing, because I think that's how people connect with you as a
I
brand in a much deeper
agree.
way.
I agree. And like I said, from day one, I even set up like, I got like a MailChimp account. I set up like people need to sign up to my website. Like I was gathering data, I was gathering emails from day one because I knew how important emails are. Like I said, investors, they love numbers. So like, at least, I've got people on my email list, I've got people in my community, I've got, so I was basically gathering a lot of information from people as I can. I was even doing like a quiz when they would sign up and like ask them about their skin, like, literally anything I can to get as much data and information from people from day one. So I've never stopped doing that.
No, it's really good. And I bet that's then equated into things like, for example, you've just gone through a Kickstarter crowdfunding process. Like, surely that helps you with that as well because you already had an audience to market that to.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a tough journey, but it that massively helped me because I've been speaking to my audience since day one.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit more about the Kickstarter then. Like, what made you go down that crowdfunding route, and like, what was the process for you to like raise the money that you wanted to raise?
So actually, people don't know this, but the amount I raised on my Kickstarter is actually what I wasn't meant to raise. I was meant to raise more.
Uh-huh.
So that actually was never my target at all. It was not meant to be that low, but it is what it is. And you move on and things happen. But it was just the dynamic of playing the game on Kickstarter. You have to put a really low target to sort of like tell the algorithm like it's you're doing well. So that was not my goal. My goal was actually meant to be a lot bigger. But anyways, I was going through. I told you like I think it was October 22. Yeah, I registered the business and I've been fundraising since then. So I spent like almost a year and a half trying to raise money from investors and nothing was going anywhere, and I was doing so much, and every time investors would be like, no, but we want you to get here to see, I was getting fed up with the same answers. I was like, you know what, I have to take this into my own hands. I knew financially I couldn't fund the business through a loan. I know some people would be like, just take out a loan, but like I was not in the position to take out a loan. That it's
Yeah.
everyone's like life is so different. You can't
No,
just
I
go,
understand
you
that.
know,
I'm the same position. Yeah, no, I get that. I wouldn't necessarily take out a loan. I would rather be applying for all of the grants, all of the funding, and like
yeah,
try and get external funding than I would take
yeah.
out a loan.
Exactly. And even that time I was applying for grants, like every single time I would see a grant, I was applying. So I never stopped, but I was getting frustrated because I feel like my timeline just kept getting pushed back, and nothing was moving forward in terms of what I could do with the funding I needed. And I didn't realize how expensive sunscreen is to manufacture compared to any other ingredient, like any other product on the market. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna look into crowdfunding, and I did because I saw like brands like Fussy, they launched on crowdfunding, and I was like, you know what? If they can do it, like I'm sure I can at least raise something. That was like just my mentality at that time. So in January, I started speaking to people that had crowdfunded in the consumer space, and I asked them, I was like, can you just tell me like how you did it? And I was talking to so many people, like probably like for every week, or yeah, I was speaking to like two people, possibly even a day. If I'm honest, I was just trying to get as much information from people. I did like get like loads of like support and help, like people like who helped me like tell me about where things to find things or what to use and stuff. So that was sort of like my guide. And I just knew that I really wanted to launch a crowdfunding. So I invested a lot of my money to find someone to create the page, how it should visually look. And at that time, I was also redoing my branding for Beam, because I literally initially when I created the brand, I think I searched like yellow on Pinterest, and I literally just put that on my website. So I had no branding at all. I had no logo. I did have a mock up. Asked someone to create for me, a designer of the products of how they look before, but they're so different now, and like the logo. But at that time during my crowdfunding, we were going through a whole rebrand. I had invested a lot of money into that, and yeah, I hired someone to do the page of my crowdfunding, the copy. I really wanted to make sure that my branding messaging was very clear. I'm not that great. I knew like where my strengths are. I'm just like, this is not my thing. Like, I'm not good at this, but I know what I want to say. So they basically laid it out for me and did everything for me, like visually. They helped me with my video, because you have to create a video for crowdfunding, like a professional one, like I would say, because that's just how the platform I work uses. So I use Kickstarter, which is probably one of like the best platforms for crowdfunding. And that's basically how I went. I launched in September, so I had been planning it since January. So it took months to get to the stage I was. And I didn't just wake up, like, and it took months. And like I would get opinion from like people on like LinkedIn when I was started posting about my crowdfunding, and people would give me tips. I'm like, listen, like, thanks, but like, I've been researching for a while, and like, they would know
Yeah.
nothing about crowdfunding. I'm like, I know, like, I've done, like, I know what I'm doing here. Like, it was getting a bit, so like, I think, yeah, it's also like sometimes you need to learn to listen to people's opinions with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a process. Like I do know a couple of people that have gone through that process, and I feel like a few years ago, like in the pandemic time, there was so many more grants available specifically for women-owned businesses. Like there was like NatWest Back Her Business and like things
Agree,
like that. Whereas
agree.
now there's really not that many options for funding because no one
No,
has any money. So
yes,
it is a tough time to be raising money and trying to get capital. And exactly what you just said, like actually your target that you achieved wasn't necessarily the target that you wanted to achieve, but it is still finance, right? There is still money
yes,
coming into your business, which is
still money.
obviously what the end goal is at the end of the day. But it is a flipping process for you to get to that. Like if you weigh up all of the hours that I imagine that you've put in and the money actually that you invested even just to get to the point of putting the crowdfund alive, like
Yeah.
that is a big job in itself, isn't it?
It was a lot. It was a lot. People like I know people see like it looked like I smashed my goal. I did theoretically on the platform to what it looks like, but theoretically in my mind, I still got to get the funding that I didn't raise from somewhere
Yeah,
where it's a very tough time to get funding in general at
it
all.
is. It is. I'm going through the same processes, so I feel your pain. And what are you going to do with the money that you have raised? Obviously, you did achieve like the Kickstarter target. Like, what is that being spent on in your business?
So that's been spent on our SPF testing. That's also really expensive. People don't realize how expensive it is. It's so expensive. So that's basically the money we've raised is half of our SPF testing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, and that's quite a big chunk of money as well. It's
it's a
not like
huge
it's like a few
chunk.
£100. It's a few £1,000.
It is, no, it's a huge chunk, and then some of the funding will go towards getting a bit of the batch of our product to do like like a small manufacturing run to send to like retailers to test the product, because we need to get them to test in an aerosol format. So like there's a lot of things that are like building up to getting our product to launch so that we can get to even be in a retailer or whatever. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's the funding is going to places, but yeah, we need more funding in terms of the manufacturing run. So
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot more that has gone to it.
Yeah, and I guess with your product as well, like just thinking about, as you just said, retailers there, your previous business was literally direct to consumer, right? Like you were going directly from yourself to your customer, whereas this business, more than likely, you're going to go down like wholesale routes or like
Yeah,
different channels to get into retailers because that's the nature of your product. It's probably better placed in a retail
yeah,
environment. So how are
yeah.
you navigating that? Because that's quite a big difference in the two business models that you've operated.
Yes. So I knew with my new business, I wanted to have control of my margin because I don't know if I remember I just said, I didn't before. My margin was
Yeah,
so poor. It was, I really wanted to pay businesses fairly, but also it was impacting my business because I wasn't getting a fair chance to kind of really have a good margin. So I really knew that my business now, I need to be in control of the margin heavily. So that's been like my plan with Beam. And I knew that I wanted to sort of use my strengths. Being from a retail background, I really wanted to make sure that I can actually use what I've been doing for years to launch my brand into retail. So that's sort of what my angle has been. And truthfully, like the first thing I did when I had the idea of Beam, also I forgot to mention, I actually reached out to one of my retail contacts and I was literally like speaking to like the buyer of like sun care and I was like, this is like my idea.
yeah,
I want to be in, like get me in. And it was the easiest thing I probably had done it throughout all of this. And I was just like, you know what, this is what I want to do, where
yeah.
I know what my strengths are in my business, sort of.
100%. You have to know your strengths. Like, exactly going back to what you said earlier, like, I know my strengths in my business, I know my weaknesses. And if I can pay money to outsource my weaknesses, I will pay the money if I have the money because I don't want to be working in a in a position that, if ultimately if you run a business, you're doing it because you want to be working on something that you love. You obviously, there's always going to be things in business that you don't like, but if you can outsource those things that you're not good at or you don't enjoy, that will make your life better and you can work more solely in like your zone of genius and doing the things that you really enjoy doing and are good at and working on the business development and the progression. That
Mm.
is where you should hopefully be, and then everything else, in an ideal world, if you have the money, you outsource all of the other things. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and you're like really doing things in the best way you possibly can. And I imagine, like, from the two businesses that you've set up, like, what differences, what challenges have you faced, like, in from journey one? Because I imagine you had learned so much through that first journey, but going into your
Yeah.
second journey you had a base level knowledge now of like how things should go, how things should run. So in theory it should have been slightly easier. I'm sure it wasn't, but in theory, like, what lessons did you take and like what challenges have you had to overcome in this new process?
I would say before I was sort of clueless about the funding landscape, but now I know that there is money out there. I know it's
Yeah,
very hard to get, but I know there is money in different ways. And I sort of was a bit clueless with my previous business about the funding landscape. Yeah, I would say compared to my previous business, I spend less on this business because I fully understand how things work now, I would say. And I also know how to use my time better without burning myself out like I did with my other business. I just know what I move a lot faster with things. I make a lot, the decisions are just much quicker, I would say, with this business than my previous business because I'm not relying on that sort of like support from others, and if that makes any sense. But what's also really different with this business is because I rely so much on other people, like, my chemist, my manufacturer, like so many people to get my product in line. It is a lot slower versus my other business. I'm like, okay, just order, send my the products by this day. I can tell it like even an earlier date, and the products will arrive. But with this business, it's a very different. It's so much. You rely on so many people to get their acts together, if that makes any sense. But
yeah,
yeah.
you're dealing directly with this. first-hand supply chain, right? So obviously there's
Yeah.
like extra people's involved and you're relying
Yeah.
heavily. So it's really important in those scenarios to like build the relationships, which it sounds like you've done. You've got like a really solid production line that may change as your business grows and develops, but it sounds like you've got off to a really good starting point. And I've really enjoyed like hearing about the whole story. But like what's next? Like what's the next step for Beame and yourself, and like where do you kind of see the brand going in the future?
Yeah, so what's next for Beam is we are hopefully going to be launching into a retailer or two in the new year. And I
Yeah.
think we are going to be also, we're working on some new MPD. So that's currently in the pipe works for anyone who is listening or watching. You sort of need to have that if you're going into retail. So I can't just launch with one product. But yeah, so that's kind of like our goal. And I would say our focus at the moment, if I'm honest, and has always been is to focus on products that are easy to reapply. So that's sort of like at the forefront of Beam and the business, and really what makes us stand out, and will make us stand out, as well as the emotional side of things of our products, through the ingredients and scents. So that's sort of like been, yeah, that's never changed since day one, and it will be core, I would say, in the next few months for the business. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting time, and I'm really excited to see where you take it all next and which retailers you end up going into and how it all comes together. But congratulations, because it looks amazing. The branding looks so good. I think it's really iconic. Like every time I scroll past, I'm like, oh, Beam. Like I know that it's you. So I think that that's really says something about like all of the work that you've put in, and like it looks really good. So congratulations, and I love your journey. I think it's super inspirational, and hopefully people listening are inspired to go off and start their own journey, or maybe even inspired to shut down one of their businesses to move into something new because it might not be working anymore. So I think that that's really admirable. So for anyone
Yeah.
that's in that situation right now, what's your number one bit of advice for someone either looking to pivot into something new or start something new completely?
I would say always trust your gut. I would say that's definitely what's helped me get to this point. But also, really, I think it's important to be reevaluating your business as often as possible to actually see what's working and speaking with your customers. And that's sort of what made it super clear for me to leave that business behind and move on to this new chapter, and really understand what wasn't working. And like now, like before, I didn't really have control of my margin, but now I know that's like my focus, I would say, with this new business. Like I wanted to change things personally, like for what my new goals are in terms of like ways of working with people. So I think, yeah, reevaluate like what you want, yeah, out of this and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Such good advice. I love the advice about the numbers. I bang about on about it like all the time. Like, look at your analytics, look at your numbers. But this is proof. This is
Yes.
proof, evidence that it has to happen. So
Oh
yeah,
my
no,
God.
that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And if anyone wants to follow Beam yourself, like how can people find you?
Yes. You can follow Beam at Beam, BEAME SPF, on Instagram, TikTok, and our website is BEAME SPF.com. And you can also follow me, Eniye_Beam, on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed catching up with you and hearing the full story. As I say, I'm watching from the sidelines, but it's been really nice to delve into it with you. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's been great speaking to you. And yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Absolutely.